Hello human beings, PowerGamer here. I wonder who that could be.
Bonjour. Oh no, it's my evil doppelganger, Phil! Yes, it is I, and I have come here to force you to play a bad video game. Oh dear, what piece of horrible electronic interactive media are you forcing me to endure? This! But I thought people liked this game. Do they? I mean, you can never really tell with this one. Yeah, I guess that's fair. I mean, do you want to play it? Because I guess I can just give it to you. I mean, I guess. I have played this game before and I liked it, so like if you wanted me to be miserable, that wouldn't really make sense. But like I did play the first adventure game, so it was only a matter of time before I got to the second one. I mean, you know what, sure, yeah, I'll take it. Okay, if you insist, give it to me. Yeah, take it. Yeah, sure, but thanks, I guess. Arrivederci. Anyway.
Sonic Adventure 2. Oh, wait, hang on, I need to spin the wheel to see if everyone likes it or not. A game that changes in terms of general reception more often than the weather changes in Florida. It's basically had every type of reputation you can possibly imagine over the years. I know Sonic games can be really divisive and people's thoughts on them can be different over time, but you'd be hard-pressed to find one that's changed as much as this. After the release of Sonic Adventure, the team was unfortunately downsized due to the Dreamcast not being able to meet Sega's sales expectations. So in 1999, 12 members of Sonic Team were transferred to San Francisco to create Sonic Team USA, if that sounds familiar, who began working on a sequel to Adventure, with Takashi Iizuka once again serving as the director and Yuji Naka being a producer. The story was written by Shiro Meikawa, who had previously worked on the game Panzer Dragoon Saga. He decided to have a portion of the game takes place in space and attempted to alter Sonic's character, since he was actually not a fan of him. The team decided to implement a scrapped idea from the first Adventure game, that being giving Sonic a rival who would serve as an anti-hero. Since the team was only a tenth of the size of the first Adventure game, development was quite challenging. Because of this, they decided to split the game into 2 campaigns as opposed to 6, and they wanted to focus on elements that they deemed completely necessary, so the gameplay was streamlined and had more of an emphasis on action. Iizuka wanted the game to have more of an American flavor since it was being developed in the US, so they took heavy design inspiration from various places in America. Sonic Adventure 2 was released to the Dreamcast on June 19th, 2001 in North America, with the rest of the world getting it only a few days later as a celebration of Sonic's 10th anniversary. While it did really well at first, it only ended up selling about 500,000 copies, since by this point it was too little too late. The Dreamcast was a commercial failure and the console was discontinued. Very poetic that the console both started and ended with Sonic Adventure. Sega officially became a third-party company, and one of their first projects was porting Sonic Adventure 2 to the newly released GameCube. Dubbed Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, this version was released on December 20th, 2001, only 6 months after the original, and it was significantly more successful, selling triple the amount of the Dreamcast version with a whopping 1.7 million copies. And since this was the first Sonic game released on a Nintendo console, it was the first exposure to the series for a lot of people. Plus, this version was later ported to the PS3, Xbox 360, and PC. Reception at the time of release was quite positive, about on par with the first game, but over the last couple of decades, that reputation has changed a lot.
I don't think I have ever seen a video game change in terms of general reception more times than Sonic Adventure 2. I mean, people have just been all over the place on this game. It's gone from one of the most popular Sonic games ever to one of the most hated, the first really bad Sonic game, the last really good Sonic game, good with some bad elements, bad with some good elements, underrated, overrated, underhated, overhated. Basically, every single type of opinion you can possibly imagine has been given to this game. But of course, where do I stand on this issue? Well, I first played this game a few years ago, knowing fully about both the praise and criticism that it's gotten over the years, and I liked it. I thought it was fun, but with how often people change their minds on this game, will mine change too after not only a second playthrough, but also finally playing the first Adventure game? Well, let's take a little peek. And yes, once again, I will be playing the GameCube version since I still do not have a Dreamcast and do not plan on getting one.
We get another pretty cool opening with all the characters, and this version is exclusive to Battle, which is kinda neat. Once again, the game is split into multiple campaigns that follow 6 characters, but there's only 2 different paths, the hero side and the dark side, which should make recapping the plot a bit easier. Let's start with the hero side. We open with Sonic being taken into custody by a military organization known as the Guardian Units of Nations, or GUN. Sonic, however, breaks out of the helicopter, rips off a chunk of its wing to use it as a snowboard, and dives headfirst into the city below. After a really awesome opening level and defeating this robot, Sonic finds this black and red hedgehog stealing a Chaos Emerald. Sonic instantly realizes that Gun had gotten the 2 of them mixed up and he was unfairly convicted. The hedgehog introduces himself as Shadow and claims to be the world's ultimate life form before using an ability that allows him to teleport himself called Chaos Control to get away, and Sonic is arrested once again. Elsewhere, Knuckles is arguing with this girl named Rouge the Bat, and yes, it's Rouge, not Rogue. I've seen multiple people make this mistake, myself included. Rouge is a treasure hunter who's obsessed with jewels and wants to add the Master Emerald to her collection, but Knuckles obviously doesn't want this. As they're arguing, Eggman shows up and almost steals it, but Knuckles shatters it into pieces to prevent it from being stolen, so both he and Rouge attempt to find the lost pieces before the other one does. And after this, Tails heads to the island where Sonic is being held in an attempt to help him out, and that's about it for the hero story. The dark story opens with Eggman infiltrating a military base in an attempt to find a weapon made by his late grandfather, Professor Gerald Robotnik. Instead of a weapon, though, he finds Shadow, who's been cryogenically frozen in here for the past 50 years. Shadow promises to grant Eggman one wish if he meets him on the space colony Ark. Jumping ahead a little bit, we find out that the Ark is home to a super weapon known as the Eclipse Cannon, which, if powered up using all 7 Chaos Emeralds, would have enough power to destroy the planet and allow Eggman to take over the world. Rouge sneaks in and offers to help them out, hoping she'll be able to find some treasure along the way, and they begrudgingly agree. So that's pretty much the main story. Shadow, Eggman, and Rouge are attempting to get all the Chaos Emeralds to power up the Eclipse Cannon, and Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles have to stop them. When playing the hero side, you follow the heroes, and when playing the dark side, you follow the villains, which is honestly a pretty cool idea. The story is often one of the main criticisms people bring up towards this game, and yeah, it is silly and has some things that don't add up, but at the very least, it is entertaining to watch it all unfold. No matter which side you're on, the characters all remain likable. The old characters are as great as ever, and the new ones are pretty solid. Rouge isn't amazing, but I think she's a fun enough addition to the cast, and Shadow is honestly my favorite character in the entire series. I know everyone jokes about him being an edgelord, but I think his design is pretty badass, his powers are cool, and his backstory is really interesting, but we'll go more into that later.
I do kind of question how the military got Sonic and Shadow mixed up, though. I mean, the general population I get, like they probably just assume Sonic disguised himself since there aren't really that many giant hedgehogs who can run faster than the speed of light and use the Chaos Emeralds, but Gunn has a bunch of information on Shadow. They should know it's him. Whatever, maybe they just want to keep it under wraps. Either way, it makes more sense than the whole Shadow Mario thing in Super Mario Sunshine. They're literally right there!
Presentation-wise, the game is a pretty mixed bag. For the time, the graphics are decent, and the character models are solid, but some of the people look a little weird. The voice acting is about on par with before, but thankfully the character animations and lip-syncing are much better. The sound editing, on the other hand, just... what the hell happened here? It is so bad. The mixing is almost always bad, some lines are cut off, and many times multiple pieces of dialogue will play at the same time when they're clearly not supposed to. It's awful. But thankfully, the music is incredible. This honestly might be my favorite soundtrack in the entire Sonic franchise. I love how each character has a different style of music. We got some high-energy rock, sexy jazz, and hilariously cheesy rap that is just as cringy as it is joyful. Plus, the main theme of the game, Live and Learn by Crush 40, is my absolute favorite song in any video game ever made. It is just awesome. Now let's actually get to the gameplay, what really makes or breaks this game for most people. Like Sonic Adventure 1, we have 6 different characters to play as, but unlike Sonic Adventure 1, there's only 3 different gameplay styles. Each side has 3 characters you play as, and they all match up with a character on the other one. Sonic and Shadow, Tails and Eggman, and Knuckles and Rouge all have the exact same controls and gameplay style. The actual levels are different, but at their core they're the same thing, which thankfully makes them a bit easier to talk about. Once again, despite the multiple gameplay styles, they do have some things in common. You can collect rings for health and extra lives, all of the power-ups from last time return, and you get upgrades as you go throughout the game, and there's a lot more of them this time. But the biggest difference from before is the progression system. The hub world has been completely removed. When one stage ends, you immediately go to the next one, excluding the cutscenes, which is a change I can easily get behind. I was not a fan of the last game's hub world, since it was way too big, and it wasn't always clear where you were supposed to go. But here, you waste no time running around trying to get to one specific spot. You just head straight into the next level, which is much appreciated. What's not appreciated, though, is your new companion, Omo Chow, who gives you hints like to call. He's placed randomly throughout the levels, and very easy to run into. Plus, a lot of his hints aren't actually helpful, so he just comes off as really annoying.
But now let's go into the more specific aspects of each gameplay style, which all actually come from characters in Sonic Adventure 1.
Sonic and Shadow are basically the same thing Sonic was in the last game. You want to reach the end of the stage as fast as possible while collecting rings and killing enemies. Shadow has all the same abilities that Sonic does. He can homing attack, spin dash, and roll into a ball to get underneath things, which I don't think was in the first adventure game. Also, I love how he can't actually run as fast as Sonic, but instead his shoes propel him to a similar speed, so instead of running, he's basically ice skating, which is a fun little detail. Honestly, there isn't too much to say about these levels, since they have all the same great qualities that they did last time. The controls are pretty solid, the level design is great, and again, each area has multiple paths you can take to reach the end. The only big change is this introduced rail grinding to the series, where you move forward automatically, but you can crouch to gain speed, I think. I honestly have no idea how the system works. And as for the upgrades, there's some the characters share and some they don't. Sonic gets the light shoes, which allow him to do the light speed dash, where you fly along a line of rings by hitting the B button, the bounce bracelet, which lets you bounce up to higher areas, the flame ring, which lets you burn metal boxes, the magic gloves, which let you pick up and throw enemies, the ancient light, which lets you dash through enemies, and the mystic melody, which lets you activate these shrines. Now Shadow gets the air shoes, which also lets him do the light dash, and he gets the flame ring, air dash, and mystic melody too, but that's it. Overall, these two have probably the best playstyle in the game. It's the only thing about this that pretty much everyone likes, and it's pretty easy to see why.
But while those ones are pretty similar, the other ones are quite different from how they were in the first game.
For Tails and Eggman, you'd think Tails would play like he did in the first adventure game, but no. Since they wanted to have the characters match playstyles, he and Eggman are in these big mechs the entire time. Tails is in the Tornado 3, and Eggman is in the Egg Walker. These levels are basically an updated version of Gamma's playstyle. You walk through these corridors shooting enemies. If you hold down the button, you can lock on to multiple targets at once, and doing this gives you bonus points. And they're the only characters to have an actual health meter instead of a ring system. Their levels are much longer than Gamma's though. Those would only take about 2 to 3 minutes, and these ones are usually around 5, and yeah, they can get pretty tedious after a while. You do still get the annoying ringing, but thankfully it's not as loud as before. Overall, Tails and Eggman are probably my least favorite playstyle. These levels are fine, I don't dislike playing them, but it's nothing that special either. Tails' upgrades are the booster, which lets you hover in the air, the bazooka lets you break metal containers, the laser blaster increases the radius of your attack, and the Mystic Melody. Yeah, I'll just say right now, every character gets the Mystic Melody. Most of Eggman's upgrades are the same thing but with different names. The jet engine is the booster, the large cannon is the bazooka, and the laser blaster doesn't even change names, but he also gets the protective armor, which lets you take more damage. And finally, we have Knuckles and Rouge, which are of course like Knuckles' levels from Adventure 1. You're placed in a small area and have to use the radar to locate 3 missing items. Usually it's pieces of the Master Emerald, but it can also be keys or Chaos Emeralds, and the location of each object is random every time, but it changes when you die, so if you're really stumped, you can just kill yourself to reset the locations. Now, while these levels are still pretty fun, they're sadly inferior to how they were before, since the radar has been nerfed. For some reason, it only gives you the location of the next item in order. So if you're near the second or third one, but don't have the first one, it won't tell you. Now granted, if you do actually find the item, you can grab it, but that's very unlikely, so it makes going through the levels take much longer since you might pass by an object before the radar detects it, meaning you have to backtrack. I don't think this ruins the levels, but it can make them more frustrating than they need to be. Instead of to call, you can find these monitors which give you hints, and there's 3 per item. Sometimes they can be helpful, but other times they're a bit too vague. For upgrades, Knuckles gets the Shovel Claw, which lets you dig underground, the Air Necklace lets you breathe underwater, the Hammer Gloves let you break metal objects, and the Sunglasses let you find hidden items. And Rouge gets the Pick Nails, the Iron Boots, and the Treasure Scope, which serve an identical purpose to everything minus the Air Necklace.
Aside from removing the hub world, the biggest change between this game and the last one is the amount of actual levels.
Sonic Adventure had you play 32 levels total, but most of them repeated themselves between characters. Here, each stage is pretty unique. Some themes might repeat themselves, but they still feel different, which is more than I could say for Adventure 1. There's 31 stages total, but weirdly they aren't balanced evenly. There's 16 in the hero story and 14 in the dark story, which I do not get. But anyways, Sonic has 6 levels, Knuckles and Eggman have 5, and Tails, Shadow, and Rouge have 4. So that gives us 10 speed levels, 9 mech levels, 9 hunting levels, and 3 more that do their own thing. Once again, each level has multiple missions to complete, but now they all have 5 instead of 3. This is stuff like collecting enough rings or finding a hidden Chow. But also like last time, these aren't required to beat the game. They just give you more of these emblems, which you get every time you beat one. However, this was also the first Sonic game to include rankings. When you beat a level, you're given a rank based on how many points you scored, with E rank being the lowest and A rank being the highest. There is no S rank in this game. You score points for killing enemies and other menial things like doing tricks, but at the end of the stage you're given extra points for the rings you collect as well as a time bonus if you beat it fast enough. And your score resets every time you die, so if you want to get all those A ranks, you need to beat the level as fast as possible while killing a bunch of enemies and not getting hit or dying once. Needless to say, I did not feel the need to go for all this. Getting an A rank on every level just gives you more emblems, and all that does is unlock an admittedly cool bonus level that's a 3D remake of Green Hill Zone, but I don't think I have the skills or time necessary to get that.
This game also has a lot more side content than the last one, and this is the biggest difference between the original version and Battle.
We have the Chow Garden returning, and granted, there's not much of a story reason to have it here since Chows never show up in the main plot, but it was in the last game, so they had to bring it back. Since there's no hub world, each level has these crates that contain keys, and getting them transports you to the Chow world after you beat the level. It works exactly the same as last time. You give them fruit, energy capsules, and animals to increase their stats, and can breed them to make them even more powerful, which you can then enter in tournaments. In addition to the races, where you can now cheer on your Chow, we have karate tournaments where you need to pump them up. Again, a fine distraction, but I didn't spend much time on it, although there is something amusing about seeing Shadow and Eggman take care of these cute little guys. For other side modes, we have a boss rush, and this game even has a multiplayer mode, which is what Battle mainly expanded on. We have one mode for each playstyle, racing in speed stages, fighting in mech stages, or racing to find collectibles in exploration stages, or you can do Chow minigames, and there's even a racing mode. It's not gonna give Mario Kart or Smash a run for their money, but the multiplayer in this game is still pretty fun. But now it's time I break up some complaints. While the controls overall are pretty solid, there are some things that can be really janky. Sometimes Sonic will need to ride on a snowboard, and turning is insanely slippery. If you're grinding on rails and try to switch, you can just jump off instead. The camera can spaz out on you, and easily the most frustrating of all, sometimes the homing attack just does not work. You can be right near an enemy and hit the button, but for some reason you just air dash instead, barely miss killing them, forcing you to take a hit or target an enemy you didn't want to. This doesn't happen too often, but when it does, it's infuriating, especially during boss fights. But my biggest complaint with this game is the level length. Sonic Adventure had some kinda long stages by the late game, but most of them were fairly comfortable and not too challenging either. But in Adventure 2, some of these levels just never end. They can go on for up to 7 minutes, and that's not including deaths where you have to repeat stuff. It certainly doesn't help that this game is significantly harder than the last one was. I only got one game over in the entire time I was playing Sonic Adventure, but Sonic Adventure 2, I don't know how many times it happened specifically, but it at least passed one hand. And since game overs make you have to start the entire level all over again, it just makes beating these take even longer.
I feel like there was an amazing amazing game hiding in here somewhere, but it just has a bunch of little quirks and annoyances that aren't deal breakers, at least for me, but they do start to add up after a while.
Let's go more into specifics. The first level in the hero's story is City Escape, which is freaking awesome. After Sonic jumps out of the helicopter, he snowboards, or I guess streetboards, through the city before ditching it, and it all ends with you running from this giant truck. This is one of the most iconic levels in all of Sonic, and for good reason. It's just so much fun going through this whole thing, and the song that plays in the background is one of the best in the game. After beating it, Sonic is attacked by the soldier and a mech called Bigfoot, so that's what was on those tapes. He flies in circles shooting you, and when he lands, you gotta hit him with the homing attack. Simple fight. After beating it, Sonic finds Shadow holding a Chaos Emerald and attempts to get it back, but Shadow uses Chaos Control to escape, and Sonic is captured again. Meanwhile, Knuckles has the whole scuffle with Rouge and Eggman, and his first level is Wild Canyon. It's a desert area with a giant fan, and you need to find 3 pieces of the Master Emerald. Pretty simple. After that, Tails heads toward Prison Island, where Sonic is being held. There, he finds Amy being attacked by Eggman, so he transforms the Tornado 3 into a mech. We then have our first rival fight, where you clash with the character's counterpart from the other story, and they are pathetically easy. Eggman leaves, and Amy reveals that she also came here to save Sonic. Tails heads into the prison, and she follows. Yeah, Amy has a semi-prominent role in the story, but you don't actually play as her. The first Tails level is Prison Lane, where you have to go through and find the core of the prison. Like before, pretty simple. Amy finds Sonic and asks him to marry her, which he rejects, but she lets him out anyway. She tells him that Shadow and Eggman are on the island, so he runs off to find them. Metal Harbor is another really cool level. You run through this landing dock, and in the end, you have to hitch a ride on a rocket before it takes off. Sonic finds Shadow in the jungle, where we get one of the 2 most iconic cutscenes in the game before another rival fight. After that, Eggman reveals that the island is going to blow up, so both hedgehogs run away. Green Forest has you run through a giant forest, swinging on vines and running down trees. This level has a time limit of 8 minutes before the island apparently explodes, and lo and behold, there it is. Pumpkin Hill, we go back to Knuckles, who's in this haunted mountain area. This is one of his best levels since the aesthetic is cool, and it's not hard to get around and find the Master Emerald pieces. After that, Eggman broadcasts his declaration of war to the entire world, where the Ark breaks open to reveal the Eclipse Cannon and fires a laser, destroying half the moon.
Wow, I'm sure that's gonna leave a lasting impact on the series. Or it's never going to be mentioned again, even in this game.
Sonic realizes that Eggman must have the Chaos Emeralds, so Tails reveals that he has the last one and can use it to find them. They're then confronted by the police and have to escape. Mission Street, Tails has to take out the cops so they can get to safety. I'm sure many people would love this level. Aquatic Mine, we cut back to Knuckles in his Master Emerald hunt, and this level is a mine where you can raise and lower the level of water. Also make sure you get the air necklace in here. It's pretty hidden, but it is necessary to beat the game later, which is dumb. Knuckles ends up in the sewers, where he finds Amy and Tails, who discovers that Eggman has been in contact with the president of whatever country they're in, I'm assuming America, so if he can find the limo, he can trace the call. Route 101 is a racing level where you have to catch up to the limo as fast as possible. If you collect enough rings, you can do a speed boost. Eggman is attempting to force the president to surrender to his Eggman Empire, or else he'll use the Eclipse Cannon to destroy the entire country.
Well, I know one potential president who would know exactly what to do in this situation.
Sonic and Tails hop in the limo and discover that the signal is coming from the Ark before the president gets a call from their unnamed agent. Sonic and friends head to the desert because Knuckles saw Eggman and Rouge go inside this pyramid, so it must have a way into the Ark. Hidden Base, Tails goes through the desert to find the entrance, a serviceable enough level, but the quicksand everywhere gets pretty annoying. Pyramid Cave, Sonic rushes through the pyramid and it's full of time switches. This level's really cool and has an awesome aesthetic to it. They get to the center, but the door is locked, so they make Knuckles pull his weight by finding the keys. Death Chamber is really annoying since you have to find the keys in this elaborate series of rooms and teleport by digging into these paintings. It's so easy to get lost in here. Knuckles is then attacked by this giant ghost named King Boom Boo. You are on thin ice with copyright law, Sega, and this is the worst boss fight in the game. He chases you in circles, and you have to wait until he breathes fire on you, hit this thing to open up these hatches, dig into his shadow, and then punch him. You have to do this 4 times, and it takes ages. The fire feels completely random, and in the last phase, it's really hard to get on the shadow and dig before he runs away. I hate this fight. They open the door, but then Eggman shows up and attacks them with the Egg Golem. You play as Sonic, and it slams his fists and head that cause shockwaves. You need to hop on these platforms conveniently sticking out of his back so you can homing attack the head. Thankfully, this is much easier than the last fight. Sonic and friends hop in the space shuttle that was here because, of course, and along the way, they lose the Master Emerald pieces, so Knuckles hops out. Everyone else arrives in the Ark, which we learn was apparently abandoned after an accident 50 years ago. That seems strange. Tails reveals he created a fake Chaos Emerald, which has similar properties to the real ones, but will negate their power, shutting down the Eclipse Cannon. Eternal Engine. Tails makes his way through the Ark, which has doors that can suck you out into space, so be careful. Sonic reaches the control panel, but Eggman seems to interfere, so he has to leave. Meteor Herd is Knuckles running around outside looking for the Master Emerald pieces. This level sucks. Navigating is really annoying, and some of these locations are just plain stupid. Knuckles then finds Rouge, and the two fight each other for the Emerald pieces. After that, they bicker, and Rouge almost falls into lava, even though she can fly, but Knuckles saves her. So she begrudgingly hands over the pieces she has, and Knuckles finally rebuilds the Master Emerald. Crazy Gadget is one of the hardest levels in the game. Sonic has to run through the Ark and flip these switches that alter gravity. The controls are really awkward, and the level goes on for ages. Sonic reaches the control room where Amy is being held hostage, Why did you bring her? And Eggman demands Sonic hand over the emerald. But he knew it was fake, so he traps Sonic in a capsule and launches him into space where it explodes. Tails decides to honor Sonic's wishes, and we have another rival fight with Eggman, who has a giant laser. Fun! But then we find out Sonic was somehow able to use Chaos Control with the fake emerald. How was he able to do this despite never doing it before, let alone with a fake emerald? Beats me. Last level, Final Rush. This is, not very fun. It's a bunch of rail grinding and tight platforming in space. It's really janky, and one mistake can lead to instant death, although you can save yourself in some places, which is nice. But the biggest problem is that this level goes on forever, and if you get a game over, it just resets your progress. I spent 40 freaking minutes on this level. But after finally beating it, Sonic confronts Shadow, who gains some respect for him, but also has to kill him. This fight is actually more unique than the other ones, since you're running along this track that slowly falls. You have to hit him a few times, but for the last two, you need to jump into these meteors, which for some reason causes him to do this super attack that you have to dodge, and then you can hurt him. Kind of annoying, but a serviceable enough fight. We then see Sonic was able to use the fake emerald to destroy the Eclipse Cannon, and the credits roll.
Well, that's it for the hero story. Now it's time for the dark story.
This opens with Iron Gate, as Eggman breaks into Prison Island to find the weapon that was apparently feared by the government. Once again, a standard opening level. At the end, he opens a capsule with the password Maria and a Chaos Emerald. There he awakens Shadow the Hedgehog, and they're attacked by a security bot named Big Shot, which is the exact same boss fight as Bigfoot. Shadow tells Eggman to meet him at the Ark, and we cut to Rouge and Knuckles bickering, which is the same cutscene as last time. Dry Lagoon, you're in this oasis looking for pieces of the Master Emerald, another decent enough level. Sand Ocean, Eggman goes through the desert to reach his base inside the pyramid. Inside, he sees a news broadcast report on Shadow stealing a Chaos Emerald from the bank, but again, they mistake him for Sonic. We then cut to Shadow and get some backstory. On the Ark, Shadow's main companion was Gerald Robotnik's granddaughter and Eggman's cousin, Maria, who was apparently there due to suffering from some illness. When Gunn began to fear what Gerald was up to, they invaded to shut down the Ark, and Maria was shot in the ensuing conflict. But before she died, she managed to send Shadow down to Earth, and now he's attempting to seek revenge for her death. Radical Highway, his first level, is awesome. You go down the street that looks very similar to Speed Highway from the last game, fighting a bunch of enemies, going around loops. It's some pretty cool stuff, and god, this music is epic. At the end, we see him meet Sonic, which is another repeated cutscene. Yeah, this happens a few times. Next level is Egg Quarters, where we see Rouge talking on the phone with someone about how she's entered Eggman's base. This is another ruin level that's thankfully less confusing, and you have to find the keys. Rouge enters the control room and uses it to teleport herself to the Ark. Lost Colony, Eggman infiltrates the Ark and has to fight a bunch of robots to get to the core. And this room is so dark it's nearly impossible to see anything. He reaches the core where Shadow shows him the Eclipse Cannon, which Eggman wants to use to conquer the world. Rouge then shows up and offers to help them find the remaining Chaos Emeralds if they give her the radar, which will help her find the Master Emerald. They agree and head back to Prison Island, where some of the emeralds are being held. They plan to have Eggman distract the guards, allowing Rouge to slip inside and find the emeralds, while Shadow plants bombs around the island to blow the whole thing up. Weapons Bed is similar to Metal Harbor, only you're Eggman this time. Then Amy shows up and mistakes Shadow for Sonic. He and Rouge leave while Eggman deals with her and then has a rival fight with Tails. Security Hall sucks. Rouge has to go through this vault and find the Chaos Emeralds, but you only have 5 minutes to do so. This wouldn't be a huge issue, but you need to hit these switches to be able to open these safes, and it's not exactly clear which ones are connected. And if time runs out, you gotta do the whole thing all over again. I hate this level. Then Rouge is attacked by Flying Dog, another security mech, only instead of the homing attack, you have to climb on these walls and fly into it. Rouge is captured, but Shadow has flashbacks to Maria and goes to save her. White Jungle is basically the same thing as Green Forest, but with a lot more vine swinging and a time limit of 10 minutes. We have a rival fight with Sonic, and then Shadow gets into the vault and uses Chaos Control to save himself and Rouge before the island goes boom. We get a flashback of Shadow talking with Maria about what life on Earth is like, and Rouge asks why he saved her, but Shadow plays that off as him just wanting the emeralds. The cannon is charged up, and they decide to demonstrate his power.
And again, this is the exact same cutscene as it is in the other story. Eggman makes an announcement, the Ark opens and fires the laser, half the moon is destroyed, you know the drill.
After that, they find the cannon will take too long to charge up again, so they gotta find the last emerald. Rouge reveals that Tails was given one for saving Station Square, which is the only plot connection this game has to the last one, so they go to find him. Route 280 is another racing level, which is a bit harder and has you catch the tornado. Skyrail has Shadow chase them down through this canyon with a bunch of grind rails. They get away and into the pyramid, but Eggman attacks them with the Egg Golem. This time, Sonic knocks off the restraining mechanism and it attacks Eggman. He does the same attacks as last time, but you shoot the body and die instantly if you fall in the sand. Back on the Ark, Rouge hacks into the computer to find information on Shadow before leaving to get the final Master Emerald pieces. Mad Space is the worst level in the game. It has all the same problems as Meteor Herd, but magnified and weird anti-gravity. God, Rouge got screwed over. We get the rival fight with Knuckles, she hands over the pieces, you know the drill. In the pyramid, Eggman discovers Sonic and Palace have a fake emerald and goes to stop them. Cosmic Wall is a really cool level since you use the jet engine to prepare yourself upward, which is fun. Problem is, this level goes on for eons. I spent 12 minutes on this level and didn't die once, so somehow I got A rank because of all the enemies. We have a rival fight with Tails, and then Shadow finds Rouge trying to steal the Chaos Emeralds. We find out that she's actually a spy working for the government, and Shadow might not be the ultimate lifeform she was sent to study. Eggman tells Shadow to get the cannon because someone's trying to stop it, and Shadow threatens to kill Rouge if she takes the emeralds. Last level, Final Chase, which is thankfully nowhere near as bad as Final Rush, though it's still kind of annoying because you run along along these weird spinning tubes. We end with a fight against Sonic, which is exactly the same as the Shadow one, and Eggman puts the final Chaos Emerald in the cannon.
That's the end of the Dark story, but much like the last game, we unlock one final chapter after beating everything. The last story.
The cannon doesn't fire, and instead a clip of Gerald plays around the world. From this and Eggman finding his diary, we find out he went insane after Maria was killed, and he tampered with the Ark so that once all 7 Chaos Emeralds were collected, instead of powering up the Eclipse Cannon, it would blast the colony into Earth, which would have enough force to destroy the entire planet before he was then arrested and executed for his war crimes. And he intended for Shadow to carry out his plan after his death. Rouge then remembers that the Master Emerald can stop the power of the Chaos Emerald, so everyone has to race to the core to shut down the colony. The final level in the game, Cannon's Core, is essentially a giant relay race where you take turns playing as every character, except Shadow, as they all attempt to reach the core of the colony. It's honestly a really cool level, but it can go on a bit too long, which I could deal with if it wasn't for lives being a thing. But then Amy, who's still here, decides to actually do something by talking to Shadow, who's totally okay with dying and humanity being destroyed. But Amy tells him that everyone on Earth deserves a chance to live and be happy, and this causes him to remember the promise he actually made to Maria, which I assume he forgot due to the cryostasis. It turns out that before she died, she asked Shadow to help mankind and give them a chance to be happy. Realizing this, Shadow rushes to the core where Sonic and Knuckles are attacked by the prototype ultimate lifeform that Rouge found information on, the Bio-Lizard. Shadow arrives to help them, and we get a pretty lousy boss fight. You run away from his head and tail, and he shoots these plasma orbs at you. You need to hit the weak spot on his head. First you have to grind on these tubes, and then he summons these orbs, which you need to homing attack. It is not reliable on actually hitting them. And the final phase, you have to float into the center, but if you get hit, you can't recover your rings, so 2 hits means death, and it takes ages to get through the fight. Once you take it out, Knuckles uses the Master Emerald to stop the Chaos Emeralds, but the Bio-Lizard has fused with the colony and is intent on keeping its collision going. And here is when things get awesome. Sonic and Shadow use the Chaos Emeralds to transform into Super Sonic and Super Shadow and fly out into space to fight the final hazard as Live and Learn kicks in, and oh man, it is so hype! The fight as you fly through space and hit these weak spots while avoiding lasers and orbs. Once again, your rings are slowly drained and you can't actually collect more. Instead, you switch between Sonic and Shadow every time you hit him, and your rings are restored in between. This is a really cool final boss, except for the fact that the hit detection is really picky. Why didn't that count? But even with that, this is pretty epic. Once it's destroyed, Sonic and Shadow come together and use Chaos Control to teleport the Ark back to where it belongs before it hits the planet. But unfortunately, this depletes the last of Shadow's power, and he falls down to Earth to his supposed death. Sonic returns to the Ark where everyone reflects on what they just went through. They all depart as Sonic bids farewell to Shadow, and the game ends with this really cool shot of him on the planet.
Is Sonic Adventure 2 a good game? In my opinion, yes. But it's not without problems. Some parts can be really janky and awkward, it has some weird design choices, and a lot of the levels can be way too long and frustrating. But even with those issues, I had a lot of fun with Sonic Adventure 2. Most of the levels are pretty awesome, the gameplay at its core is really solid, and while the story is silly and has some plot holes, it is still entertaining and has some great characters. I think this game could really benefit from an HD remaster, one that fixes up the controls and improves the cutscenes. But even with the issues, I really like Sonic Adventure 2, and if you're a Sonic fan, it is an easy recommendation, especially since it's going to be the basis for the 3rd Sonic movie, which comes out in a few months. God, I cannot wait for that. Not since 2005 has everyone been so excited to see child murder.